Life in Istanbul has been disturbed by clashes between protesters and the Turkish police for a fifth night in a row. Joe Parkinson spent last night at barricades where protesters faced off with police. He says that the activists are settling in for the long haul. Joe, tell us just how are the protesters digging in?
That's right, Nick. Well, as you say, it's the second week of nationwide protests here in Turkey, and parts of Istanbul, parts of other cities, but Istanbul, which was last week a favorite to host the 2020 Olympics, have been transformed to something quite different, something that you would recognize almost as a kind of battle zone. Yesterday I was in a part of town called Gümüşhane, which is home to foreign embassies, and all the way along that street there's now barricades, ramparts made of pieces of twisted metal, wood, broken glass that the protesters believe will hold back the police from entering Taksim Square, which is the epicenter of these nationwide protests.
But I thought, Joe, that the government had essentially apologized.
The government made some conciliatory noises yesterday, and the Deputy Prime Minister offered an apology of sorts. But that's not really what the protesters here are looking for. That certainly hasn't assuaged their concerns. The protesters are waiting for the Prime Minister, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who's very much the focus of their ire, to get back from a 4-day trip in North Africa. They want an apology from him, and to be frank, they want a policy change from him, and they want a change in tone. For them, he's become too arrogant, and his government has become too deaf to anybody that's not within its core constituency.
In the meantime, Joe, are the numbers of protesters growing? Are there fears that this could escalate, spread to other cities that haven't seen it already?
In Istanbul, it's difficult to say whether the numbers are growing. It kind of ebbs and flows. The trade unions are present today, and they're beefing up the numbers in Taksim Square. I was told in Gümüşhane yesterday that by the protesters there that every night more people come to try and defend that territory. Certainly, these protests have spread to a bunch of cities across Turkey, and we're hearing every night about serious clashes across the country. Whether they can maintain that momentum, whether the government can succeed in this PR game to try and take out the momentum of the protests, at the moment it's very unclear.
At this stage, Joe, is there some way of describing or identifying the sorts of people that are doing the protesting?
Well, it's definitely a broad coalition of people. I mean, the protests started in Istanbul and in the richest cities of Turkey, and a lot of the people here are young, middle class, educated. However, it's a little bit broader than that, and it's certainly very different to the old dimensions of Turkish protest. This used to be a very, very sort of strictly classified way of political protesting in this country: leftist versus rightist, secularists versus people who are more religious. This time it appears to be different, and that's what's presenting such a difficult problem for the government.
Finally, Joe, I mean, tourists, sorry, I was going to say tourists, Turkey is a big tourist destination. Are there any fears that this really could start damaging the country's reputation?
Well, the timing probably couldn't be worse in that respect. It's right at the beginning of peak tourism season. The Turkish tourism industry has been growing and growing rapidly over the past 10 years, taking the market from places like Greece, which has suffered its own unrest. We've been talking to people who work in the industry, hoteliers, and they've been saying already that people are cancelling their bookings. So perhaps it'll be reversed this year, and Greece will recoup some of that business. Certainly, I think people working in that business, in the tourist industry, will be very, very nervous indeed.
Joe, thank you.